A hero is an ordinary individual who finds the strength to persevere and endure in spite of overwhelming obstacles. The wasteland is a cruel place. No pony ever said it was somewhere they'd love living in. At least no pony who ever stepped out from the rock they'd been living under and lived to talk about it. Every pony out there has suffered the pain of a needless loss. Whether to raiders, ghouls, mutated creatures, or just exposure, the wasteland always takes a pony before their time. Some days it's just those who were too young to understand how cruel it can be. Other days it takes those who are in the wrong place at the wrong time. However, there are those who are lucky, the lucky few, who could evade it. Ponies who are so well versed in the workings of the wasteland that they could avoid its deathly gaze for long enough to live to an age that they got to see their grandchildren. But even though ponies knew that one day they will meet their end on the wasteland, no pony can hide forever. Not from the wastes. Even so, when that time comes, at least it would be on their terms. That's how they should have gone. Every pony who died tonight deserved to have had the time to hide just a little longer. Not to go out in another needless war, not to Phileas' wrath. Harmony pulled the marauder back into the ambulance garage in the hospital. No pony had said a thing since the roof, and I don't really blame them. It had all happened so fast, even I'd started to lose hope. Even if I could still feel the hope burning inside of me, the numbing cold from the others left me wondering what I could even do. The only one who I knew still held hope in their heart was Shadow. As the car rolled to a stop, the Arcano engine gave a sharp squeal. The light smoke started to waft from under the armored hood, and Harmony shut the car off with a sigh. When she did, she dropped into an all but eerie silence. The hospital, the city, hell, even the storm were all draped in it now. Everything felt so still in that moment. "Have a pony get out," Harmony said quietly, keeping her pained eyes staring down at her hooves as they rested on the steering wheel. Diesel gave a grunt and pushed his power-armored self out the doorless passenger seat. Without a word, he turned around and held his hoof out for Gage. Hesitantly, she took it and pulled herself out as well. The two of them pulled each other close before walking towards the stairwell. Diesel turned his head back to look at us, staring at me through a blank expression that the armored ranger helmets always gave. "I'm going to give my report to the Elder." His voice came through the helmet without the resolve he'd had before. "I'm certain he'll, wish to speak to you as well." I simply nodded and waited for him to leave. I wanted to talk to Harmony alone. If I could do anything to help relight the flame of hope in her, I didn't want to have any pony interfering or bothering us. And I meant any pony. "Shadow?" I asked, turning to him as he sat back in the seat with a yawn. Flying around all night as he has, along with having to haul me around, that really might have taken its toll on his energy. "Can you go check on Prettius for me?" I gave him a soft smile as he returned one of his own. "Make sure he's not too angry about being left behind." "Sure." He nodded, stretching his wings before pulling himself out along the rear bench seat. Once he'd freed himself from the vehicle, he spread his wings and took off once again into the night. "Storm, stop," Harmony said sternly. She shut her eyes and pressed herself back against the seat. The steering wheel burrowed slightly as she tightened her hooves around it, straining along with her legs as she looked more tense than she had even during any combat I'd seen her in. "I know what y'all are wanting to do, but I'm asking you to not." Opening her eyes, she looked over at me slowly. "Maybe after all this is over, but I ain't ready when there's work needing to be done." I could only sigh and nod. Without her willing to talk, there was little that I could even do. Sure, I could try to talk to her about it, but I can't force it. Not after what she's lost. I knew Harmony, and sure, she was hiding her grief, but I knew she wouldn't try to kill herself. She was too stubborn to give up like that. And even with everything she's lost, she was a fighter to the bitter end. There was only one thing I could think of that might take her mind off everything. "How can I help you with your work?" I said flatly. I leaned back over the door on my side and gave the handle a pull. There was a rattling snap from the inside of it, and the door handle itself fell off. Annoyingly, the damaged door stayed shut tightly. "I need you to go up and talk to that big boss stallion up there." As she spoke, she looked to relax a bit. "I'll need as many crates of explosives as you can requisition." At the risk of sounding dumb as always, I scooted myself closer to her. "Explosives?" As I got closer, she pulled herself off the wheel and across the seat towards the doorless side. "Why?" "Don't know if y'all noticed," she said, pausing as she pulled herself out of the car, trotting around until the still smoking front. She put her hooves on the hood. "But I think the Marauder has gone just about as far as she'll ever go. I'm hoping that with a little work, I might be able to make her run straight, at least, to the metal barricade in the arena." You can't just blow open the door," I stammered, quickly pulling myself out of the doorway as well. "If you had forgotten, everybody who was in Baltimore on the lockdown is trapped inside." "And?" Harmony said coldly. With a grunt, she unlatched the hood and pushed it open. The smell of ozone quickly filled the air as the small crackling fire flickered in the engine compartment. "Y'all don't even know if they're still alive." "Are you willing to risk that?" I asked. Grief was one thing, but this kind of disregard for the ponies in there was unacceptable to me. "Can y'all just do me a favor and ask yourself something?" Harmony hissed as she reached into the hood and smacked at the fire until it sizzled out. "What would Phileas need with all those ponies once they was done digging?" With a snap and a flash, she whined and pulled her hoof back. As she shook it painfully, she looked over at me with a fairly annoyed glare. "Besides, if they're all dead, it ain't nothing he can't just fix. Right?" "Still," I paused. As much as it didn't make sense for him to keep them alive, I couldn't. Could I? I didn't want to give up on the ponies, but Phileas would have known we'd go after them. More than likely it was all just a trap for us. "Storm, I understand your hesitation, but y'all gotta weigh their lives against the whole wasteland." She sighed, going back to tinkering about inside the hood of the vehicle. "Normally I'd be for helping and not risking these ponies' lives." Harmony then said something that hurt. "Are you sure that you ain't letting that fear of your parents are in there getting in the way?" The words died in my throat. Was I still hoping that they were still alive? Could that have been driving my actions away from how I should have been planning to do this? I wanted to scream. Part of me blamed Harmony for bringing it up because she's angry about her own mother. But how could I blame her at all? There was no fault in her logic. She had as much drive to kill this bastard for what he did to Pallet alone. Was it really just me who'd lost myself in the idea that I could save them? "It might not be the same war we'd wanted to prepare you for, but knowing that others might perish under your command is not something you can allow yourself to be fazed by." Aunt Rarity even told me that, but I don't think I understood it at the time. At least, not like I should have. Even if Baltimore is lost, so long as the rest of the wastes are safe, their sacrifice would be worthwhile. "You're right," I nodded. "This is too important of a to risk. We need to take down Phileas, no matter the cost." "That isn't what Cottage is saying," Fiji called out from the doorway. I don't know how long he'd been standing there, but his words were annoying as usual, even if they weren't his to speak. "You might want to go talk to him. I think he's got the idea that it's time to cut their losses." All right, Harmony sighed. My mother ain't dead, so we can just run on home. She turned and backed away from the marauder. Come on, Storm. Let's go have ourselves a friendly chat with Elder Cottage. Panting and heaving, both Harmony and I made it up to the command center, just using the stairs. The two of us took a moment to catch our breath before opening the door into the busy hallway. Unfortunately, the hallway was a different kind of busy this time around. It left us both speechless. Make sure those stations are broken down and prepped for transport in 5 minutes, ponies! Cottage called out as the flurry of robed ponies felt like it moved at an even faster pace than before. Mango! He looked around for a moment before his eyes fell upon us, just as the expression fell to a scowl. I'm here! A very pregnant mare wormed her way through the crowd from another room down the hall. She looked exhausted, but the smile on her muzzle mirrored the hope I could feel she radiated. Scribe Lemonade, take over the operation. Cottage called out, not even looking at her, as he called out over the hustle and bustle around us. I need to speak to some ponies before we evacuate. Yes, sir. She nodded. Evacuate! Both Harmony and I shouted at him. Like the asshole he'd proven himself to be time and time again, he didn't even answer us. Rather, he simply turned and retreated into his office. It was enough to make the flames of me roar to life once again. Both Harmony and I pushed our way through the crowd of ponies. A scribe who hadn't been watching where they were going bumped into me, and I simply shoved them aside. The stacks of paper he was carrying exploded into a shower that rained down through the hallway. Harmony pressed herself past me and reached the door first. With a spin and an angry yell, she bucked out her hind legs and smashed the door open. I'd never seen her so angry. Miss Storm and Miss Harmony. Cottage growled as he stood over the map table looking at it. He didn't even glance up as we entered. If you couldn't tell, we are too busy for any more of your And that was as far as Cottage made it before Harmony trot up and hit him hard with a right hook. She clipped him square under the jaw and sent him down to the floor. In a flash, Diesel was on her, holding around her with his power armor to keep her from beating the stallion senseless. You fucking coward! She spat at him. How could you just pack up and abandon all those ponies fighting to keep y'all safe? Cottage grunted as he pulled himself back off the floor, hoofing at his jaw. I don't know if you noticed, Miss Harmony, but we lost the Nautilus. He glared at her. I'm done dealing with outsiders. Do you have any idea the cost we've endured with your petty conflicts? How many years' worth of resources we could have put to better use? My mother and the Sunshine Caravan gave y'all most of them, she raged, tugging and kicking putatively against Diesel's hold. Hell, she ain't ever asked for nothing back from 'em either. Y'all got 'em for free. Oh, but we did pay. The elder seethed and stepped up closer to Harmony. If his eyes were magical energy weapons, his gaze would have melted through Harmony in the blink of an eye. Accepting things from you gave us a debt of lives that Elder Maple felt obliged to pay. And we have paid for it. With interest. His words felt cold and hollow, reflecting the darkness that sat inside of him. Cottage had lost the flame of hope, and I could feel a void in him greater than any pony today. So you can go, run off, and enjoy the scraps of the world that you have won today. But I don't ever want you to come asking the Rangers for help, ever again. From this point forward, all contingents are being folded into the Manhattan hub. Contact with outsiders is prohibited, and trespassers will be shot on sight. For the first time in so many conversations, his gaze turned from her. However, it wasn't to me. Rather, he looked past Diesel and towards the doorway. Am I clear? He growled to Gage, who sat against the wall, so huddled up that I'd completely missed her when we came in. No, was all the response that Cottage received. choose your next words carefully, acolyte. Cottage stiffened, his face burning a bright red. You're already asking for a court-martial. With zero due respect, she's right, sir. Gage looked up from her corner with the biggest grin across her muzzle. You're a fucking coward. You are suspended from duty, young lady. He snapped as he attempted to push past Harmony. That had been a mistake because she lashed out and wrapped a hoof around his neck tightly, pulling him in. Diesel, restrain her. He struggled to get out between gasps as she nearly choked the life out of him. Diesel did so, simply using his augmented strength to pry Harmony's legs from around his neck. The moment he was free, Gage zipped past me and pushed him back against the map table. The only family I have left is the Steel Rangers. And in this family, we don't give up when shit gets tough. She growled against him. I don't care if you're in charge now, but you're not my fucking elder. Elder Maple got us stuck in this fight because we thought we could make a difference. Yeah, so fucking what if we've suffered losses? That's what we do. That's what makes us better than those outsiders you hate so goddess damn much. My parents are goddess damned heroes for what they did, and you'll never measure up to them. Cottage simply sat there. He didn't fight her at all. He just laid against the table as his expression only darkened. You don't understand the scope of what this fight has cost us. Gage raised her cyber hoof in the air and held it there. You want to fucking say that again? Swinging down hard, she punched a wide hoof hole through the map and table next to Cottage's head. Tell me again that I don't understand loss, and the next swing will promote Mango to Elder. Gage. Diesel barked at her. That's enough. Look, I don't care what you've lost. Preed's voice chimed in from the door behind us. It caught us all off guard, and we turned to look at him. The hallway past him had fallen completely silent. Dozens of rangers simply stared into the room with horrified looks across their muzzles. If you care so much about your resources, then you have to know that the most efficient way out of this mess is destroying Phileas. If you care about the lives of your rangers, then more will save if you take down Phileas. Prius snorted as he walked forward into the room. You have report after report, all the analytics and logistics that point towards it. You aren't a dumb stallion, Cottage. You know the quickest way out is straight ahead. But yet, you want to run. You are committed, whether you like it or not. We all are. I spoke up, finding my moment to cut in. Refugees from Chasm, Dodge, Sunshine City, and more than half a dozen other settlements are here, fighting right now to give us this one shot. I raised my voice, turning towards the rangers who were listening in the hallway. We've gathered here from all corners of the wasteland to fight an enemy far greater than one we've faced in our lives. As I spoke, I realized something. That void that I felt from Cottage, that hopelessness inside of him, radiated from only him. Telling him what he needed to hear wouldn't do any of us any good. Even from where I stood, I could feel the hope burning inside each and every pony out there. Phileas is killed without care. Stallions, mares, even foals aren't spared from his wrath. I continued, stepping forward towards them. I've watched settlements fall to his armies. I've seen him tear down the lives that we've built, but no pony has given up. I stomped for emphasis, and when I did, it sparked something inside of me that flared to life like a flick from my lighter. With a burst of blue, the air around me erupted and encased me in an armor of ethereal flame. The sight elicited a gasp from the ponies in the hall, but none of them turned in fear from what they saw. This is the last city that he will take from us. The ponies that he holds hostage. The last he will ever threaten. That is because we will fight him down to the last mare. Down to his last breath. The room around me was awash in blue light, and through the shimmering air around me, a soft light began to glow around the ponies looking on. The prismatic outlines that reflected the elements highlighted each of them and every pony that I could see. each and every connection to the elements that these ponies must represent, flared as their hope grew. We are going to finish this fight, and there won't be because of our weapons. It won't be because we never gave up. It will be because we stood together as wastelanders and said not one more settlement falls. Not one more fight will be had in our homes. Not one more day will he last in our wasteland. Turning my gaze back to Cottage, his expression still hadn't changed, and there was no outline around him. I don't care what you say about the costs. Phileas will not succeed tonight, and I will not be alone when I stop him. A pregnant pause fell across the entire floor of the hospital. I don't think a single pony even let out so much as a breath as we waited for Cottage's response. Sadly, there was never one that came. So, Proteus instead broke the silence and turned towards the hall with a smile. Who will follow us to end this fight? Who will stand with us in the fight to come? Silence still reigned in the hallways, even though I could see their hope nearly pouring out of them. Waited for any pony at all to step forward. I will. Gage nodded and stepped up to me. Excuse me, coming through. A soft voice called from the back of the hall. The crowd parted, and from them emerged 3 heavily bandaged up mares. I will, Kiwi Tart said after clearing her throat. Me too. Spicy Salsa nodded as she leaned heavily against Cinnamon Chips. The mute mare simply nodded as well, the hope inside of her alone outshining nearly every other pony around her. What began as a trickle became a river. Voices from throughout the crowd began to speak up, louder and louder until it became a torrent of noise from those who wanted to help. This was it. This was how I always was supposed to be. I hadn't known any of these ponies, but in the middle of a war, I had galvanized them. The hope that they filled the air with me, with more energy than I ever had. My aching muscles and my sore bones no longer pained me as their hope washed over me. The elements had been right about what I was, but Tasteless had put it best, if crudely at that. I was a weapon, and I would let the ponies in this wasteland wield me against Phileas, until he withered into nothingness from the collective might. Well, I'll say this much. Proteus sighed and walked up to me, looking me over. That was a hell of a lot better than the last inspirational speech you gave. He smirked and shrugged. However, still a little bit too cliché for my tastes, but hey, it got the job done. As he smiled, I looked over myself as well. The ethereal wings across my back flickered and licked at the air like fire, ebbing as each pulse of hope surged from the crowd outside. The flicker above me wafted as I turned my head from side to side. The blue flame horn that I assumed rose from my forehead didn't burn or feel like anything when I rose my hoof to it. As I shrugged, as I figured that the ethereal horn was, or no, I was still me. You might mean well. Cottage grunted, shoving Gage off of him lightly. But what I said stands. The glare that he gave hadn't changed one iota in the last 5 minutes. After this fight's done, that's it. The Rangers are done being Equestria's bucking bag. Tain't mattin' none to me. Harmony scoffed as she finally pulled herself free from Diesel's hold. My friends are plenty good enough to do their job, and yours. With a stomp of her hoof, she turned around and headed for the door. Now, if you don't mind, I've got some explosive to rig up for a door needing to be brought down. I agree. Proteus nodded, canting his head towards the door and hoofing out for me. If this assault is to work, we're going to need a bit more prepared than we are now. All right. I nodded and took his hoof in mine. Let's get going. When I said I needed to be outfitted for the fight, I didn't quite think of it like this. I said slowly as Cinnamon Chips rolled her eyes and continued to tighten the straps around my forelegs. The old patient care room was small, stuffy, and dirty, but at least it gave me a bit of privacy as I'd gotten myself redressed. The yellowing white of the old, no longer sterile walls stung my eyes almost as much as the old fluorescent lighting did. Staring out the window would have been a nice distraction, but the black sheet draped over it was moldy and made my skin itch just looking at it. Spicy Salsa was laid out on the old hospital bed, her muzzle wrapped around a gun cleaning kit. She'd really taken to giving my rifle a good work-over. I don't think that it had that kind of strip cleaning service since the last time Harmony worked on it. Well, yeah. Kiwi nodded as she tinkered over the counter. The smell of ozone and solder wafted through the air as she worked on something. With a few adjustments, however, the recon armor you're wearing will be able to refract projected magical fields from the wearer. That is great and all. The lightweight suit was less armor and more something. The whole suit felt flexible, and even the shiny plates interspersed all over didn't seem too thick. It wasn't like I'd expected power armor, but a suit of combat armor would have been nice. Turning around as Cinnamon moved to my rear legs, at the very least I could say that it made my flank look better than I had in years. I'd just like to be a bit more bullet resistant is all. The polymer plates will soak a shot or two each, and the weave between them will slow a shot enough that it shouldn't do too much damage. Kiwi sighed as she went back to working on her project. It's recon armor, Salsa said as she spat the cleaning kit from her muzzle. You aren't supposed to get shot in it. There was a knock on the door behind me, and I turned my head around just in time to see Shadow opening it and poking his head in. He froze as his eyes looked over me, and his muzzle moved without actually projecting any words. Seriously, I love the guy, but he was still a bit of a mystery to me. That thought kicked back what Pretius had said at Tenpony, and I did my best to force it back. Shadow was more than a mystery to me, and I wouldn't give him up for anything in the world. He blinked a few times before getting his thoughts together. You look great. Slipping inside, he shut the door behind him. He probably removed his armor to not take up so much space in the halls, but I was just happy to see him without it again. I've always admired a man in uniform. That pulled a giggle from not only me, but from Kiwi and Salsa as well. You never know, I replied, getting a pat from Cinnamon to tell me the armor was fully secured. Maybe I'll take to wearing it more often. I sauntered myself up to him, dropping my voice into a sultry tone as I nuzzled along his neck up to his ear. Just for you? He shuddered at that thought and brought his hoof up to my chin. Slowly, he pressed his muzzle down against mine and kissed me. I never wanted that moment to end. The smile he wore as it did, however, didn't make for bad compensation. The only lasted for a moment before he gave my cheek a soft caress with his wing. Storm? He spoke softly. Whatever happens out there, I want you to know that meeting you changed my life forever. I couldn't help but stare into his big blue eyes as he spoke, hopelessly lost in their warmth. With Iron, I wasn't sure if I could ever love a mare or what love was. But with you, he took my forehoof in his own and pressed them to his chest. I know in my heart that you are the only mare that I will ever love in this world. Shadow. I spoke again, only to be cut off by another quick kiss. I sighed with my own small, warm smile as he tugged on my leg and pulled me close against him. Don't talk like that, I sighed, wrapping my hooves around him. We're going to get through this, the both of us. I looked up at him, and I found him sitting with his eyes closed as he listened to me. Together. Together. He smiled and nodded, simply holding me. The door behind him opened up. This time, Feech's eyes peeked around the corner. A wide smile drawing across his muzzle killed my own, and I knew that we were in for it now. I would suggest you two get a room. He started, pushing himself in. But I see that you already have one. As he walked past us, the doors swung wider, and the others filed in. Prettius, Gage, and Gallant slipped inside the small room before Pretty's magic shut the door behind them. Although, Fidget continued, "My offer for more company still stands, you know." "Feature? I understand this is between you and him." He waved his hoof dismissively. "I'm not opposed to simply watching either." "Feature!" I snapped, and for some reason, getting a little chuckle out of Preed. "Sit down and shut up." With a huff, my mind focused on the armor that a striped asshole was now wearing. He too was wearing a set of the same armor I was, along with both Gage and Preed. Every pony outside of Shadow and Gallant had it on, and that only piqued my curiosity. "And done!" Kiwi called out joyously. "At least I hope so." "What is it that you are doing?" Prettius inquired before I could. "Does it have something to do with these ridiculous outfits that you are making us wear?" With a sigh, he hoofed at the smooth black armor that hugged his body tighter than mine. I know that his form was just an illusionary one, but the ghoul under it was showing through. Emaciated ribs and gaunt limbs were all over my eyes, stopping where his illusion met the seams of the headpiece. I'd rather like to have a set of combat armor again. "See?" I held my hoof out to him. "I'm not the only pony who thought that." "The reason is that the material for the recon armor is made out of specially material that amplifies the invisibility field generated by a stealth buck." She sighed, hoofing an odd jumble of Arcanotech circuits and wiring off the countertop. Out of the side of it stuck a very recognizable form of the aforementioned stealth buck. "Using this device that I rigged up with it, the field should burn out much quicker, but it should stretch wide enough that each of your armors should envelop you and your equipment when you're using this one." "I don't quite understand." Feature, for once, spoke up with something more than a pickup line. "Why would it be sneaking?" Even with Gage's EFS tick and the smoke to drop line of sight, Kiwi rubbed at her mane and looked over to Gage with a shrug. "Well, they'll still mow down anyone they hear coming. No pony's going to want to run out of a stream of bullet fire." With a smile, she held out the device towards Prettius, who took it in his magic. "So, we're outfitting a few advanced teams to sneak out onto those rocks around the arena and keep their attention long enough for the main attack force can charge in unharassed." "That's great and all, but you forgot one thing." Prettius spoke up. "Even if we're invisible, we'll still leave tracks in the snow." He twirled the oddly shaped Arcano device in his grasp and examined it. "We won't make it 10 feet before they know what they're up to." "Told you they'd find a flaw in it." Salsa chimed in with a sigh, flopping back down under the bed. "Snow? I mean, it's been everywhere. How would they have missed that?" "Then, it seems your distraction needs a distraction." Pi chimed in with a muffled voice from under Gage's covered cyber limb. "Why don't you tell them what we thought of, Gage?" Gage sighed and rolled her eyes, ending up staring at me. "I keep forgetting that she can magic her way through my thoughts," she muttered. Of all the things about Pi I missed, monitoring my thoughts through my pip-buck was not one of them. "Why not use the artillery to mask our approach?" "We only have one box of smoke rounds," Salsa retorted quickly. "We don't have enough salvos for 2. "I wasn't talking about smoke." Gage shrugged. "Use normal heat on them. If we're lucky, we could hit a few of them." "That wouldn't work." Kiwi shook her head and turned to me with a look of confusion. "Weren't we holding off on using real rounds to keep the ponies in the arena safe from a stray shot?" She waved her hoof in dismissal. "Regardless, if the ground were dry, then the dust kicked up might have been enough, but with the snow, they'll only keep their head down long enough to shield themselves from the blast. We'd have to fire multiple salvos and—" With that pause, her tone changed to one filled with more worry than anything. "You're not in power armor. At that range, you could be cut down by shrapnel before you even got to the rocks. Or goddesses, you could be hit by a round itself. They aren't very accurate without being with those talisman-seeking shells, and we already used a lot of those up." I say we risk it. Feature suggested like it was any given Tuesday. Yeah, but the rest of us aren't somehow unkillable. Prettius snorted. One of these days I'll figure out how you work. It's a wonderful story. Feature fired back with a snide smile. How about we meet up next week for coffee, and I'll tell you all about it. My pip vision flashed as the alarm I'd set earlier kicked off. With a quick flick, I pressed the buttons on my pip buck and turned it off. The small clock on my vision fade told me the one thing I didn't want to see. 11:55 p.m. 45. Boys, I snapped as I shot them both a glare. Save your wit for another time. We don't have time for this. Turning back around, I looked over to Gallant, who, since we'd come in, had simply sat at the window and peered out from behind the blackout curtain of it. Kiwi, if there's another way, I'd suggest it, but we're going to have to go all in here. I watched as she gave a disappointed nod and halfway slumped into her bandaged rear hoof. Is there anything else we need to know? No, she said softly. You're all ready to go. Looking at her as she stared back, I finally realized how tired and worn out she looked. Not just her either. As I looked around the room, I found that each and every one of my friends looked like hell. I felt horrible for having to ask them to go with me, even though I knew I couldn't do without them. However, it was easier when, underneath all those bruises, cuts, and bandages, and the exhaustion, lay the raging torrent of hope that they all let burn inside of them like wildfires. Not a single one of them had anything but hope that we could pull this off. And looking across all their faces, I couldn't help but reflect that hope in my own. Then this is it. I sighed with a light laugh. Once we're out there, the moment we get through the gate and into the arena, we're there. No more places for him to hide, no more tricks up his sleeve. Those words made Prettius smile brighter than ever. I wanted to thank you all, and with whatever happens out there, I don't want to risk not having said what I needed to. All of you didn't have a choice in this fight. Even if I hadn't asked, you would all be here right now, fighting beside me anyway. I spoke, closing my eyes as I felt their warm flames press against me, even through the suit. I felt like hugging Mama all those years ago. 2 months ago, I barely had any friends, and even though we've only known each other for a short time, you all choose to fight with me. I could feel the warm tears rolling down my cheeks, but I didn't care. And I couldn't have asked for a better group of ponies to befriend. Fidget cleared his throat. And Zebra? I laughed. Fucking asshole. Looking over at him, he too wore the kindest smile I'd ever seen, and probably the only genuine, too. I sighed and wiped at my wet cheeks. Every pony's going to be fighting for us out there. They're all looking for us to go out there and finish this fight for them. Looking at them, even Gage and Shadow had started to cry as well. And some of them won't be coming back from this. Hell, plenty already haven't. Looking at Gage, I nodded. It's not just those still alive who are looking for us to win. Tasteless, Fruit, Frosty, Longbow, Maple, Skyline, Pallet, Thatcher, Huckleberry, and every pony else that we've lost. They're all still counting on us to finish this fight for them. So the very least we can do is do it for them. Is kick Phileas's undead ass all the way back to Tartarus. Once and for all. You are ready. Gallant's voice resonated within me as he spoke. My mind flashed back to the dark room of the elements for a moment before it caught up. You can do what I have so far been unable to do for so many years. Gallant spoke with a reverence that he hadn't had before. And for the first time in a millennia, I have one thing that I've been missing for all these years. With a glance back, his muzzle curled into a sad smile. Hope that my old friend can finally find the peace that he deserves. We can do this, Gallant. I smiled and nodded at him. Together, we can end this forever. Chapter end. The night is ended. This is the morning. Quest finished. Hear no evil. quest started into the belly of the beast.